Photoshop fam? I'm Rick Navarro and this is the Pixel Laundry Photoshop Academy. Okay, let's take a little bit of a deeper dive into this workspace so that we understand it completely and we know how to navigate around the application, okay? This first bar here is known as the application bar, and these have settings and menu sets that have to do with the application itself. Again, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of this can be very self-explanatory after you've been using it for a while. For example, if I need to manipulate something that has to do with the image, I'll go to the image menu set and adjust from there. If I'm working on a specific layers, which is this palette right here, and I need to do something that is specifically dealing with layers, I can go to the layer menu set and so on and so forth. Type, selections, filters, and the rest are, again, self-explanatory. The main ones you're probably going to use are your image, your layer, and your select. You have type options here, but I rarely ever use them. I actually use more of my paragraph or paragraph styles, but I'll show you that later. Filters, there's going to be an entire set of filters that are going to be available to you. But again, pro tip, you don't want to go too heavy on the filters. You get your effects in Photoshop typically by using a combination of techniques, not necessarily filters. Filters kind of scream amateur, but they're super fun to work with in the beginning. So get all those amateur bugs out, find out exactly what every single one of these things does, and then later learn how to use them in combination with several techniques so that it doesn't scream like you're a novice right out the beginning. So that is the application bar. Now this over here, as we mentioned, is the toolbar. Now I want to show you how these palettes move around, how they can create a custom workspace for you. First and foremost, all of your palettes sit inside of what's known as the application frame. This is basically the frame that allows Photoshop to be entirely self-encompassed. In PCs, I believe it's pretty much the default, but there's probably an option that you can turn it off as well. I've been working with Macs for 15 years, and they didn't always kind of come by default. Sometimes the application would be floating, so if you clicked off of it, you would all of a sudden be in a different application or on your desktop or in a Finder window, and you didn't realize you weren't in Photoshop anymore. And sometimes that got a little wonky. You get used to it. But after, in the beginning, I should say, it was a little strange. So in some of these more recent versions of Photoshop, I've noticed that the application is being turned on by default in the beginning. But if you don't want that on, you can turn it off. Now, some of the advantages of having it all together like this is that if I am working in Photoshop and I do click out of it, it's all self-encompassed, it's all together. I don't have to worry about it. That's all of my Photoshop right there. But if I want to work a little bit more seamlessly, let me show you how my space actually looks. And I can turn off this application frame. This is more how I work. Now, another hotkey for zoom, I meant to mention this earlier, is if you hold down the Command and Mac, Control for PC, and plus or minus keys, that allows me to zoom in and out of the window without using the zoom tool. Also, if you hit the F key and you cycle through it, meaning you tap it once, you tap it again, you tap it one more time, you're gonna get a couple different options that allow you different viewing spaces. So if I go full screen for this first one and hit Command or Control 0, this is going to give me 100% zoom. If I use the zoom tool, if I tap on Z, I can zoom in and out. If I use Control or Command plus or minus, I can zoom in and out. So as you can see, there's several different ways to do the same thing. Now again, this is how I work because I have a lot of this memorized already, but when you're working in the beginning, you may not necessarily want to do that. You may want to have everything right front and center. But after you get a bit of a workflow and you know as many of the hotkeys as I do, I can kind of zoom in and out as I see fit and work as I see fit. Make sure I'm on the right layer. I may be making adjustments. I can move very, very quickly because I know all of the hotkeys already. Let's go ahead and come out of that and go back to our default workspace. But as you can see, the application frame is now gone. If I click out of there, now I've clicked out of Photoshop. but once I'm in full screen, it's almost like having the application frame still there. Okay, I wanted to show you one more thing over here in the toolbar. If you'll notice in the small right-hand corner of every single one of these tools, there's an arrow, except the zoom tool. And basically what that means is for every one of these buttons or every one of these tools that has an arrow in it, that there is additional tools that are under that main button. So if you'll take a look over here, you'll notice if I click and hold down, a few more options come up for every single one of these tools. If I click and hold, this one right here is one of the other few ones that doesn't have any more. Click and hold, click and hold. Okay, so another way to access those is by holding the Shift key and then cycling through whatever the hotkey is for that particular tool. So for example, for the Move tool, if I hold Shift and hit V and tap it a few times, now I'm cycling through all of the options for that tool. And as I mentioned earlier, you'll notice that every time I click on a new tool, I've got a new set of options up at the top. Now, I'm not going to go through each of the individual options for the tools because they can get really overwhelming very quickly. But I just want you to know that they exist and that when we need them, we'll address them at that time. Okay, so back to these panels. So how do we adjust the panels? What's cool about these panels is that they're tearaway panels. And basically what that means is that they can be torn away from their original position. If you'll notice, if you just click and drag it, you can pull out these individual panels and now you can create your own panels or your own palettes. So I can grab any one of these and combine them however I want by dragging and dropping over them. And you'll notice that it highlights, and that means that I can now drop it. For my most frequently used panels, now I can create custom panels and I don't have to have all of them scattered all across the board. This might be something that kind of comes in time in terms of like what exactly are your favorite panels, but it's super, super useful because you may be working on a smaller monitor. You may have a 13-inch monitor. You may have a 32-inch monitor, and each of those monitors are going to offer you a different option in how you want to work. If I'm on a smaller computer, like I'm traveling and I've taken a small laptop with me, my workspace setup might be different, and I'll save those preferences so that whenever I come back to that computer, it's always ready for me to go. If I'm working here on a desktop, then that setup might be different. And this functionality allows me the flexibility in order to do something like that. So I can also, if I right click on these with my mouse, I can close them and get rid of panels that maybe I don't need or don't use very often. And remember, again, all of these panels are listed right here under the Windows menu set, and all of them are available for you at any time. So if you accidentally close one, you know where you can go back and get one. Also, in the upper right-hand corner, you'll notice there's this little arrow. It's a close down option that will put that entire panel into an icon just like the tools, which is super, super cool because when you start stacking these, you can save even more space by putting them down into an icon. Now watch what you can do with this. If I stack them, I can stack them in sections and have them available to me just like I could by adding several panels to one palette. This resize right here will also allow me to stretch them out a little bit. Now if you'll notice, I can put them at the top. I can put them in between. Or I can put them all out here in a panel and open it up together. A combination of these is my preferred way to work. As I mentioned earlier, I've got some presets already saved, and this goes under the workspace menu set. Under your workspace, you can see there's going to be a few default. Now, if you tend to work in one of these particular categories more than another, like for example, if you work on a lot of photography images, maybe the preset photography is the best way for you to work. If you work in a lot of web design, maybe the graphics and web options is the best way for you to work. This is something that you kind of just have to feel out with time, but you have a lot of options available, and Photoshop has already given you a strong base to kind of begin and to kind of play with to start from. Okay, so I'm going to go let's go ahead and create a custom layout. So what I want to do is I'm going to grab my layers. I am going to grab characters. I'm going to go ahead and grab the history palette. Let's grab adjustments, and everything else we're going to close. If I right click on the panel tab itself, I can close the entire group, or I can close just the one panel. Close tab, group, minimize. Let's go ahead and close the tab group, which is going to close all of the tabs that are here together. Now, if you'll notice, this one here didn't close down, and that was because it was separated top and bottom like this. This group is defined. There's a small thin line right here that separates these individual groups that allows me to work in groups as I see fit. So I'm going to close all of these down here and leave this one open. Now, actually, what I'm going to do is grab my layers and my adjustments, and I'm going to actually add one more paths. Put my paths here. And the reason you might want a long stretch of real estate on your screen is because, especially in your layers, Photoshop can have something like 999,000 layers or something crazy like that. I would never recommend doing that, but I have worked on several projects where the layers are upwards over 50 layers. So having that space here to kind of navigate just on your layers palette alone is super, super helpful. So anyway, so I'm going to put this in here, and I'm going to stack these, but I'm not going to put them in the same layered grouping or in the same panel grouping. Now they're together as one. I'm going to put this right here, over here, and now I can scale and stretch it so that I am maximizing as much of my real estate as possible. Now, as I mentioned before, I'm right-handed, so I don't like having to go across the screen every single time to go to something I may need in my tool palette. So I put my tools right over here on the right-hand side. And like I said, if you drag till you get that little blue highlighted line, that will allow you to snap all of the palettes together. So now they're moving as one cohesive unit. I can drag them off my screen. I can pull them back on if I want to. Okay, so I've created a custom workspace. Now what you want to do here is go ahead and save that workspace. So if you go under workspace and you go new workspace, you can now save all of your locations, all of your custom palettes, and maybe any keyboard shortcuts that you've created. Photoshop will save them in Photoshop, so that way if for some reason it gets shuffled, you can reload that again. Let's just name this sample. Okay, I'm going to click all my keyboards, all my menus, where my toolbar is, and click save. And then if you go back here under workspace, you'll notice there it is, workspace sample. Now, in addition to Photoshop's default workspaces, I've got custom workspaces that I can use to work with. Okay guys, thank you so much for watching. That's all I got for you. That was lesson 1 of the Pixel Laundry Photoshop Academy Photoshop 101 class. Yeah, give it up for yourself. Thank you for sticking around. Make sure you click on the next video so you can catch the next class in this series of classes for Photoshop 101. Create every day. Talk to you guys real soon. Bye.